guidance in how artists can navigate the financial side of things within the art world. So we've had collectors on board who've been able to share a few tips about how artists can connect with galleries and collectors and sell their work. We've also had we've also had an artist on board sharing their own experiences of navigating the art world as an artist, and sustaining themselves financially as well. And we've also had a conversation looking at law and economics as well. And today's final session for the series, we're going to be looking at fundraising in the arts with Debbie Cooper, who Innocent will introduce within the next few moments. But before we get into the session, we just want to say a massive thank you to Debbie for coming along on board today. And would also like to thank Format Photography Festival and Quad in Derby, who have supported this event throughout the past 5 weeks. So thank you so much to Quad and Format. So I'm going to hand over to my colleague Innocent, who will introduce today's speaker. And just to let you know, before I do go into that, just to let you know that this event is being streamed on YouTube and on Zoom as well. There will be an opportunity for questions and answers towards the end of the event. If you are tuning in on Zoom, you'll be able to use the chat function. And if you are tuning into this event on YouTube, you'll be able to use the comment function to ask your questions or to leave feedback about the sessions. We do ask, if you are viewing on Zoom, just to keep your camera switched off if you're not speaking, and to also keep your mics muted as well. And we also would like to let you know that this event is being recorded and will be kept on our YouTube page. So if you do have a question later on and you have your camera on, you will be featured on the video. So I'll hand over to Innocent now. Thank you.
Thanks, Azizo. Thanks, everyone. And yeah. So today for the final talk, we decided to look into fundraising and financing the arts, given all the conversations we've had so far, starting from looking at the problems of art and money from the artist's point of view, looking at the money markets, and looking at the African art ecosystem, and then from there looking at legal repercussions and legal implications of the art economy, the creative economy. So today we decided perhaps it's best to, cap everything up by looking at the specific details on how to raise money. We don't want our talks to be all talk and no action. So here's the action parts. So if you have pen, paper, and whatever, I should bring them out, because we'll be having Debbie Cooper, who is an artist, creator, producer, and fundraiser, working for Format International Festival as producer, digital artist training curator for Quad, and is a manager of Photographic Collections Network. Debbie has written and delivered mass participation projects and public engagements work, and produced exhibitions for Quad and Format, and taken projects to China, India, and Australia. Debbie is also an artist. Her work is based around photography, sculpture, sound, and installation, and influenced by historical stories, materials, and practices. She explores old and new processes, interconnecting with the digital and new technologies, and regularly teaches glass dry plate photography at galleries. Debbie has been an artist in residence at many notable organizations and archives, including the Dartmoor Men's Prison, the WW Winter Photography, National Health Service, and others. She has had work commissioned by museums and local governments, and has exhibited her works widely in China. As a fundraiser and mentor, Debbie has supported many artists to gain their first successful funding award, and regularly gives career advice to artists and creatives. So thank you, Debbie, for joining us today. So I'm just going to pass the ball to you and let you hit it out of the park.
Thank you, Innocent, and thank you for inviting me to be here. It is genuinely an honour. I'm really passionate about fundraising and helping artists get funding. Before we started the talk, we were just talking about how funding's a game. It's a series of little things you need to do, sometimes in a certain order, If you've got a great project and you understand how to manage the game, there's no reason why you shouldn't get your project funded. We talked about how today's talk should go, and we decided it's going to be in two parts. So the first bit is my journey as an artist and how I funded my projects. I'm going to try not to talk about that for too long. And then I'm going to go more into detail in advice about how to apply for funding. Now, lots of the things I'm talking about is specifically about funding where there's an application to fill in. But that translates into commissions or job opportunities or other things in the arts that you might need to apply for. So hopefully these tips and advice and stories will be useful in multiple ways. If you've got questions as we go along, put them into the chat. If you're watching on YouTube, you can put them in the chat there and they will be transferred into the Zoom chat, so I should be able to answer them. And I'm more than happy to talk in more detail about anything that I discussed today. So starting with my journey, the very first funding application I ever applied for was the Vickers Relief Fund. I was a young parent in my early 20s with a 5-year-old, and we'd just become homeless. And I was told by some local support officers that I could apply to this charity and get some funding to help us get out of that situation. And although that was a difficult time in my life, it really just woke me up to, oh, I can fill out forms and tell people about my need and my story, and I'll get funding. Good to know. And that became something that I then looked into later on as my career developed. My life came back together, we got home, and I started going to college. And the next thing I'm going to show you is slightly embarrassing. It's a very old piece of work from my student days when I was in my second year of my degree. And this was the first time I'd tried to involve commercial funding in my work. So I wanted to make a piece of work that was about passage of time. So I had a series of 8 mirrors and the public standing in the middle and a projection of time over them. But I didn't want to buy 8 mirrors because they're quite expensive. So I went to a local furniture shop where I live and told them about the work I was making. And I asked if they would donate or let me loan in particular, because I didn't want to keep them, 8 mirrors. They said they would be honoured. I couldn't believe that word, honoured to take part in supporting the arts. But they couldn't just give me 8 mirrors because they didn't know who I was. So would I be prepared to buy them on agreement, they take them back straight after the exhibition? So we wrote up a little contract. I bought 8 mirrors, I used them in the exhibition, I took them back to the shop, and they donated 2 for free to me once they gave me my money back, on the basis that I then signed 2 of their mirrors, which they put in the shop, and they put a big sign up and some information about the exhibition and told the public that they were sponsoring artists. And not only that, is if you could pay extra for these works that had been signed because they were now art pieces. And that really alerted me to what sponsors want from it. They want this extra level of, well, we're already selling this stuff. We want to get out there, we want people to know about what we're doing. And people are honoured to support the arts, which is, yeah, really interesting. When I graduated, I really struggled to find places to show my work. It's really hard. And I came across the idea, because lots of people were working at that time in empty shops that were disused. But I thought, well, actually, I want exhibitions that have staff in them, so I don't have to pay or organise people to be in the empty shops to look after the work. So what happens if I speak to shop owners? And I spoke to the bank and various other shopkeepers in a street in Derby and asked if they would let me use their shop spaces, their windows in particular, and little elements of their shop inside the building to place artists' artworks. Again, they said they'd be honoured, and that would be a brilliant opportunity for them. I also then asked them to put some money towards paying for some printed material, a map of the exhibition, which they really wanted to happen because it mapped all the shops that were taking part with their opening hours and invited you to come and find some hidden artworks in these shops. And so that was the start of my curating career. I curated a joint exhibition across a street in Derby, which is just really close to where Quad and Format is. Artists put their artworks amongst the items in the shop. Shopkeepers loved it and paid me money towards it, which covered my costs. Only thing was my time. And it started me connecting to people in the city and making art in the city. And here's just a few of the works that were featured in the show. And it also alerted me to the opportunities that can happen. So, for example, this is a audio and video shop selling TVs and so forth. You know, they've got like 20 TVs in there. So suddenly we could have installations in there for free across multiple screens and with sound. And it was a great opportunity to really stretch out how I was curating and what the work we were showing. Also, I did this again. It was so popular. I did this in second year and then had performances in the shop windows, which, widened my networks, gave opportunities for artists, brought the public in to engage with artworks. It was a genuinely positive experience. I started working for Quad that following year, and I was taking up a lot of my time with commuting, and I started photographing my commute every day. I'm always on the lookout for how to make whatever I'm doing into a project. And I started connecting with other artists online who were also photographing their commutes. I connected to artists in America, in Australia, all over the world. And I wanted to create an exhibition. I proposed it to Format and included it in the show. And I think this might have been 2013, I forget. And if you can just see here, project supported by. So I contacted my local council and they have a very small charitable fund, which was left a very long time ago and just supports people in the few miles of where I live. I applied for some funding and got my print costs covered. And again, they were really happy to have their logo at an international festival. And that was, daily commutes. Following on from that, I wrote the mass participation project called Mapping Derby, which was one of my favourite projects I've ever worked on for Format, and I've worked on a lot of Format projects, where we asked the public of Derby to start to map the city. We asked them to physically attach these to maps, to nail them on, like GPS maps, but with, old school. And following on from this, we did a call out to the following format to ask people to donate any pictures to do with Derby at work. And this picture came in, which blew my mind. And it was by W.W. Winter. Innocent mentioned earlier that I'd been artist in residence. So I hot-stepped straight over to them to talk to them about their archive, became really good friends with the people who worked there. And then I asked them if I could be their artist in residence. This is Winter's today. They're an everyday working photo studio that just happened to be going in Derby for over 150 years. So I asked them if I could be their artist in residence. They said, what's one of those? And number two, do we have to pay you? I said, no, you don't. I will find the funding myself. So they said, yeah, knock yourself out. If you want to hang around here all day and make work, we're not going to stop you. Because a lot of my career has been about asking. If you don't ask, you don't get. If I didn't ask in the first place to get support to make my student work, if I didn't ask to be an artist in residence, none of these things would have happened. If I didn't ask the shopkeepers. So they took me on a tour around their building and I discovered these amazing glass plates that were in the cellar, and it really connected something in me, and I really wanted to make work in response to this. I applied to the Arts Council England, and got £15,000 to become artist in residence. Now, the key thing to know about public funding, this is the staff who work there, Angela and Louisa, who are absolutely amazing. Let's just stop and say how great they are. And this was Hubert, the owner. So one of the key things about getting public funding is that you need to involve the public, because it's public money, which makes sense. When you're going for private sponsorship, that's not a problem. But when it's public money, you've got to find ways to involve the public. So it's about thinking about how do you want people to take part? What do you want them to get out of your work? Well, I really wanted to find people across the city who looked like anybody on these pictures. And I started a public call out. I made little cards, a bit like collector cards. I was inspired by my son's love of Pokemon cards, and printed these and scattered them in shops and cafes and on buses, and said, if you look like anybody on these pictures or think of anybody who does, get in touch. I'll take your photograph for free. And people start getting in touch. People also started getting in touch to say that I'm in these photographs, and what are you doing with my picture? So I met lots of lovely older people in the city who wanted to talk to me about their experience and their story. I got this camera, which just scared the hell out of me, and tried to learn how to use it and started taking photographs. I did really jump in with both my feet without actually knowing what I was doing, but that's sort of like many of the projects I've done as well. Started taking people's portraits. I learned a lot in a very short amount of time. And I started trying to pair people up across time. And I had amazing responses from participants. This guy here said that he felt this connection now to the guy he'd been paired with. He felt that there's some bond. They'd sat in the same room 100 years apart, and they were now connected forever. I exhibited this at Format 15, alongside another work, because I was told by Hubert, the owner of Winters, that during World War II, they'd given away a lot of their glass plates to be made into greenhouses, and I wanted to respond to this. So I made greenhouse made out of negatives. Here it is. And here it is at the launch of Format 2015. I was very honoured to have the launch right next to my work. I couldn't believe my luck. Had some really nice response from people online. But what I realised was the exhibition I'd had and the project I'd had wasn't enough. This collection was so important, it had to be cared for by some better people than me who knew more what they were doing. And I wrote a funding bid to the Heritage Lottery Fund, as they were then, they're now renamed, to ask for £51,000 to get an archivist in and start archiving the amazing work that is in WW Winter. And it was successful, well, as you can see here. And we started having an archivist in, we started moving some of the glass plates, caring for them, working with volunteers. And it's possibly one of the proudest projects of my life. Apologies, I did know a cat would end up coming. Off you go. Yeah, we found absolute treasures on this project, and the £51,000 that was fundraised for couldn't even touch what work needs to be done. Following on from that, I applied to the Artists International Development Fund, which was a joint fund between the British Council and the Arts Council, now has been absorbed into the Developing Your Creative Practice. And this was to take the work to Beijing, as part of Beijing Photo Festival, where it was somehow got renamed as Ancient Portraits of Vegetables. Something lost in translation, but that's one of the joys of working internationally. This work was taken to Beijing, this is the Millennium Centre, and I met some amazing people who helped me install the work. And Lucky Shen from the British Council came to visit. And there's Louise, who some of you might know, a director of Format, at our red carpet opening night, which I've never been to exhibition launches like the ones in China, and blew my mind. Yeah, 2017. One of the great things about having a project that's funded and maybe is ambitious and exciting is that you often get press and international press, and from that you can get lots of other work. I've done interviews from magazines and newspapers all over the world, and this has knocked on me getting other opportunities in similar projects. So I've been offered lots of other archive projects. This is one for St Helens Council. This was heritage funded, and here I worked with the glass plates. I reproduced some of the plates so they could use handling sessions, which was really fun to do. And for here I made a permanent work. This is the first permanent work I've ever made, and it ended up weighing 2 tons and was a whole logistics problem in shifting it, and cost a lot to make. So I photographed people from around the city and combined them with the original portraits on glass bricks. Actually, this one, let me just show you. So these are using these glass bricks that are used architecturally, and they used to be made in that town, hence why I chose to make the work on those. And this is the piece, it's a permanent piece in a library in Newton Le Willows in Merseyside. And I learned a lot about working with other people, working with metal experts and electronics people, and shifting a work this big. From that, I was invited to be artist in residence in Dartmoor, which was another funded project through Heritage Fund. Because once people start to know you for something, you can often end up getting more and more work, which is a good thing and a bad thing, depending on what you want from your career. It was really an intense emotional experience working in a prison that I wasn't expecting. I felt some strange things about how I felt about people being incarcerated and making work there. I was asked to make work to respond to an archive story about, during World War I, people who refused to fight were held in Dartmoor prison. So I was invited to make work in response to this. These are the conscientious objectors. And some of them refused to fight on political grounds. They said it wasn't their war. It wasn't for them to kill other people when it was a rich person's war, not a working men's war. Some people because of religious reasons. Eventually, after a lot of searching, I found these diaries in a library in Leeds, and I took them into the prison, well, photocopies, can't take the originals in, and did audio recordings with the prisoners in their cells. From this, made cyanotype pictures and photographs and combined them in a few exhibitions that toured with audio and photographs. I was starting to get better known for fundraising and managing projects as well. So I've also worked on a few projects where I'm not the artist, but I'm either a project manager or doing public engagement. This was when we got strategic touring funding, got 148,000 for a touring project across the East Midlands, which gathered community cinefilm from people. To apply to Heritage Fund, you can't apply as an individual, you have to apply as an organisation. So we made an organisation just to apply. We became a collective and had a joint bank account and official meetings and minuted our meetings, and then applied for the money and was successful. This project took us around the East Midlands with some amazing artists and musicians. This is Dave Sturt, who worked on the project, who was envisaged the project. And we invited people to write memories down about their photographs, about their communities. We had events where people could swap memories for cake, which works really well. People will swap a lot of things for cake. We gathered footage from people's homes, or met with them and digitized their footage. This went into archives and turned into also a final film that was performed. There's a picture of it being performed here. So it was performed with local musicians. And I met tons of lovely, interesting people who told me about their lives and their stories on the way. As an artist, I love to take part in things like this. I want to hear about people's lives and stories. So working on this professionally as a project manager also gives me opportunities to widen my practice and question what work I'm making about and my connections. So I'm going to move on now, because you've heard enough about my work, to getting your project funded. There is this constant gap between what you want to make and the money, what the funders say they will fund versus what you actually want to make. But often when you delve into the project idea and the funders or sponsors' aims or the commission's aims, there's a little bit of crossover. And that's where the magic happens. It's about, rather than trying to shift your entire project into their aims, just really focusing on those crossover areas that you can get enough strength out of to enable you to do most, if not all, the things you want to do in your project, because of the strength of where the elements that cross over into from your project into what they support. So here is some of the funders' aims. Lots of you might know about the Arts Council. Apologies if a lot of these are to do with English funders, but if you're applying for a commission or to a sponsor or to any funder internationally, it is about really getting to grips with what their aims are, understanding what they mean by that. The Arts Council, for for instance, has 4 investment principles, which are ambition and quality, inclusivity and relevance, dynamism, and environmental responsibility. They're all really long words, but essentially they want really high quality work. And by ambition, they want something they feel hasn't been done before. Equally, there are no new ideas. 7 billion people on the planet, so something we think about has been done by somebody else before, but it's new to you, new to your experience, new to the people you're working with. So, you can riff on that and find a way that makes it unique to the story and the experience you're bringing to it. Inclusivity and relevance, lots of funders are really focusing on that, which is great. It's about making sure the work you do really connects to a lot of people, especially if it's public money. Dynamism is about how you're responding to the situation. Life's changing a lot. Now, how can you respond? Because they want to support artists and organisations that will exist in the future. If you look at it, it's their investment principles. So although they fund you, they're investing like bankers invest in the future. They want to make sure where their money goes is with organisations and artists who are still going to exist in 10, 20, 30 years. They're banking on your future. So that's about showing them that you've got a plan, that you are dynamic, that you are making a long-term career, and the money that you get from them is going to help you on that way. Because you want to still be producing work in 20 years and they want to help you get there. Environmental responsibility, lots of funders are bringing this into their work as well now. How is the work you're doing either carbon neutral or talking about the environment or making an impact in any way? Have a look at that. So Heritage Fund, a wider range of people. Again, with it being public money, they want to know that what you're doing goes beyond just you and is much further. They're also focused on community heritage, landscapes and nature, wellbeing and heritage at risk. I've included a few other funders like Jerwood, Elephant Trust, Pollock, Kraisner and Artcry that all fund individual artists. And a lot of them talk about artistic growth and new ideas. So they want something new. Not many funders want to tour existing work, but you could respond to your own existing work if that's what you're really trying to do. So really read up on what they're saying. I can't stress that enough. And then make a case for the importance of your project. When it comes down to a commission or a funding experience, your application is in competition with anybody else who's applied. So why is yours important? Why does yours need to happen now? But also use their language. Try and understand how they talk about their fund and their aims and their objectives and bounce that back at them. Most of the funders also want you to share that with the public, and I'll talk a bit more about engagement shortly. And then they want to see the money's well spent, and I'll also talk a bit about the budget. So if we look at one of the funders, like the Heritage Fund, and they've got a mandatory outcome of a wider range of people, most of the funders will ask you that. And actually also a lot of private sponsors will want the same. They want people to know that you've worked with them, that you're doing good work. They really want to bask in a bit of reflected glory from you. So think about who and how you can engage the public. So when you're engaging the public, there's always the who, why, and how. Looking at the who. On the Arts Council form, they've got quite a lot of detail about who you think your audience are, whether it's an identified group, such as young people, older people, a certain ethnicity, maybe LGBTQ. Really think about if there is a group. It doesn't have to be, but also why you want to work with that group. Don't just do it because that's someone the funders like you to work with. And think about why it's important that people take part in arts and culture. Think about why it matters to you. Why do you enjoy being part of the arts world? What do you get from making artwork? What do you get when other people see your artwork and respond to that? And can you extrapolate that idea? Can you make that idea bigger into a wider group of people? And culture shapes society. Think about all the things that you engage with, whether it's film or computer games or exhibitions or just design, things around your life that are designed. All of those moments where creative people have had an input into your daily life. The culture and arts constantly influences us. So think about how you can tap into making work that influences people, even if in small ways, even if it's just in momentary experiences. And then when it comes to the how, engaging is not the same as informing. I see a lot of artists and people who are writing their first application thinking that informing is enough. Well, I made this thing and I told people, and there we go. Well, actually, just absorbing information, although that's useful, it's great to be in the audience, is not the same as taking part and being part of it. So are there elements of your practice and of your work that you could draw people in? Going back to the Arts Council form, it's asked you who will engage with it and to describe your target audience. And I've got a quote here from quite an old film, which not everybody will know, The Field of Dreams, that build it and they will come. A lot of people think if you can just put an exhibition on and people will get there, but actually you need to make marketing ideas about how you will tell people about it, how you will engage them. Why would they be interested? Of course they'll be interested, but think about how you then describe that in words. And when it says public, it doesn't have to be the general public. So you might decide you want to make work for other artists and involve some artist development and support for that. Or you might want to really focus on just people who live in your nearby streets. You know, the public can be quite broad. We're also quite small. When I did the project in Dartmoor Prison, they were classed as my public audience, yet they're not part of the public, they're incarcerated. So you really think about who you want to work with and why. So when it comes to informing versus engaging, or artist versus participant, I want to show you some work from another project at Format 2017. It was themed Habitat this year, and it was a follow-on project with WW Winters where I went back and got another £50,000 from the Heritage Lottery Fund. Thank you very much. And this is the exhibition that we came up with. And I worked on this with Peter Bonnell and a few other people. It was a really fun project. So the exhibition, it's lots of information. You can go and look at it. It's definitely informing. But in the second room, because it's had 2 rooms, we created a space where it was engaging. So there was a board where people could list any photo studios and heritage they knew about in Derby. There was sessions where people could research together, because actually researching on your own can be a bit lonely. So we had research sessions where people could come and look through books and online resources. People could bring photographs and have them scanned. In response to the backdrops on the photographs from the Winters studio, we had some backdrops made and invited people to take their own Victorian selfie and share these online. But that doesn't undervalue what an exhibition puts across. You know, people still get a lot of information from it and enjoy it. And there's moments like with these chaps showed up and found that their grandfather's butcher was in the exhibition. That blew their minds, and they wanted to tell us all about it and share a story. So both are important, but really try and think about are you engaging or are you informing, and how those can work together. There's some more public engagement. So when I showed you the work from St Helens, where I did the big installation, permanent installation, there was a huge amount of public engagement that had to go on with the community before that work was made. And one of the things we did was I took lots of the archive photographs, turned them into line drawings, like colouring in, and took them into care homes and into schools and did workshops about St Helens in the past and St Helens in the future. I invited young people and old people. Actually, these were workshops for grandparents and grandchildren. And I invited them to make their own picture books, redesigning their version of the archive. Of course, all of these stories are made up, but it just gives them a chance to decide what they think this picture could be. It doesn't have to be the truth, because they're using it as a creative output or a creative starting point. I also took some photographs into care homes and invited old people to make cyanotypes. I had a really great time doing this. So when you're engaging the public, think about what do you want from your participants. It's really good to start behind what do you want them to get from it? Do you want them to understand the concept of why you're making the artwork? Do you want them to learn skill? Like in this activity, I wanted them to learn about what a cyanotype is. They didn't need to know about the concept behind the exhibition or the project too much, but it was purely about skill making. Whereas in these workshops with young people, they were looking at then and now. They were looking at a picture of St Helens 50 years ago and now, and they were talking about how times have changed. They were tapping more into the concept of the project. So have a think about what you want them to get from it. You can go in so many different directions. It doesn't have to be an intensive workshop. You can do small engagements that happen in the gallery when you're not there. You can also just say you want people to have fun. That's allowed. You want them to come and see your work and have a fun time and take part in something while they're there. So think about the takeaway from that experience. And then it becomes easier to plan your engagement rather than just going, oh, I can do this and this and I'm not, or maybe you're stuck for ideas. What would you like people to walk away from the experience with? And then you can backtrack and start to shape what your engagement might be. These are some more pictures of work I did for Format, where we worked with heritage photographs and young people. And this was just fun. This was purely to get them to think that archives can be a really fun experience. So this was with the youth forum at Format, and had them cut out photographs and then we photographed them in the city. And from those pictures, we made GIFs or hand cranked GIFs. So we went back between digital and physical. So these are GIF machines that are literally just like flick books on a handle. Absolutely fabulous, really good fun to make. And these were just kits that we bought. So these were in the exhibition and people really enjoyed doing it. For another workshop, again at Quad, wanted young parents to understand that digital can be part of their life. Lots of people often feel that digital isn't for them. Apart from just absorbing it from computers, you don't feel that you can actually engage with it or create with it. So we did sessions for young parents where they did handprints from their babies, and these were then scanned. They were scanned at first with an iPad and then went into a 3D printing machine. And this 3D printer, which I'll show you in a moment, was running all the time in the gallery space, or actually in the reception area, so people could see and talk and have conversations about what was happening. And the end result was that families and young people learned a bit more about digital and sparked off some creative ideas about maybe they could do something themselves. So I'm going to move on now to learning the funder's language. And lots of people, when they're applying for either commission or a funding opportunity, fall into the pitfall of thinking, well, the funder uses quite long words and talks about it in certain ways, so I maybe need to be really art speak. And actually, that's not the way. It really is about clarity. But the caveat to that is it's really good to know what words they use the most and try and bounce them back to them. So one of my tips is to go to a funding organisation that you're thinking about applying, or a commission, copy and paste that text into a great little website called wordcounter.net. It's free to use. You copy and paste it in, and it comes up with a density of what words they use the most. So this one uses cultural, sector, creative, new, industries. And when the person who's reading your application reads these words back at them, they start to think, oh, this sounds like someone we'd work with. This sounds like something we do. It's a really subtle way, but it really works. It's mirroring. I'm sure people, you've heard about this, the act of mirroring. So yeah, have a look and just familiarise yourself with what a commissioner is looking for, with what a funder is looking for. It's also really useful to do on job applications as well. And then when it comes to writing about your project, it's so important to tell a story. Don't get caught up in using really long words. I've just showed you about words, so it's sort of something going against what I've just said. Use some of their language back at them, but don't try and make it into art speak. Try and tell a story. A real human being will read your application. Write to them. Tell them There's amazing, this is an amazing exhibition. For example, when I told you about the Winters archive, there's this amazing archive in Derby and no one's worked with it. People don't know what history is there. And I want to be the person that takes this work and shows it to the public. Make that a story. Try and take the funder on a journey with you. When you start writing about it, or you're applying for a commission, what is new and interesting? Why is it important? Why now? Who will benefit? And then the last point, which people sometimes miss, is what does success look like? I bring that up because your project needs to end at some point. You might be applying for funding for work that is part of a really long piece of work that will last you the rest of your life. When I wrote for funding for the Winters archive, their archive is bigger than 20 years worth of work of scanning. Yeah, there's no way we could have written a complete project. But what I could say is, could you give us £50,000 for us to do this much work on an exhibition and finish it at this point and then reflect on that and learn from it? So it's really important that you know when your project is finished. It might be something that you carry on doing for years, but you need an end point for a funder to understand, for the commission to know that you did it. You did what you said you're going to do, that you had an exhibition, that you completed some work and it was shown. So you've got to define complete. But also that enables you to understand how to plan your project because you know where you're supposed to be ending. You've made yourself a goal. How do you know if it's going to be successful? If you can answer those questions, you can start to shape and plan your project, and you can start to understand how you would evaluate it because you know where you'll be if you get the funding and the project is successful. So don't forget, it's read by a real human being. So if you write it in this really long, verbose way where people don't quite know what you mean, lots of things juxtaposed and lots of words, other words that I don't use very often, they're not going to get it because they're a real human being. They also want to be impressed and excited about your project. This person reads applications all day long. You want them to go, oh, this is the one, this one's exciting. You want them to go home to their partner and go, oh, wow, I read an amazing one today. I can't wait. So I hope this one's successful. You want them to fight your corner because what happens in most funders is someone reads it, they get excited about it and write recommendations and put it forward. It then goes to a meeting where they discuss all the applications. And the person who has read your application and got it and put it forward is fighting for your case. So give them the best chance to fight for what your project is. Get them to understand it and be on your side and fight in your corner. Put some passion into it. Say why it's important and why you think it should happen, but also what you get from it. You know, how it developed you as an artist in your career. And don't forget, they want to spend this money. They genuinely want to give it away. So you just want to help them, give them all the tools they can to agree with what you're doing and fight for your project. So the next thing about the money is you have to create a budget. And lots of artists have asked me for advice and support on how to create this. And when you haven't experienced it, it can be quite hard to look at an exhibition or a project. It's got lots of things like public engagement and travel and artwork. And how do you even make a budget to cost this up and make it happen? So if you've already defined success, you know where the end point is. You now need to start making the stepping stones that get you there. And if it helps, use post-it notes, actually make stepping stones. End point could be the exhibition. Well, what's the one before that? And what's before that? And what's before that? So keep stepping back. For example, exhibition. The day before the exhibition, you're installing. The day before that, you're traveling to the gallery. Well, maybe the week before that, you're framing the artworks. Maybe the week before that, you're printing them if they're 2D. You know, maybe the day before, you're editing them and deciding which ones are going to print. Try and work out all the steps. And each one of those steps has a time cost in your time, which you don't have to charge the project, but you can. But also they have a cash cost. So work out which ones are costing purely in time, which ones are in time and money. And then take a step back and just forget about the funding. So just think about, if I was to make this actual project happen with the stepping stones I've made out of my own pockets, out of my own credit card and get into debt, how much would it cost me? It might scare you when you work out that it's many thousands, or maybe it's cheaper than that, maybe it's just a few hundred. But once you've worked that out, it can really give you much more power into structuring how you deal with the project. So things to include might be materials, equipment, time, space to make work, travel, Marketing is really important because both the funders, the sponsors, whoever you're working with, want people to come. They want to know about it. So you need to make sure that that's going out there. Public engagement, other people. Do work with other people. You don't have to do all this yourself. You know, you might talk to other artists who've worked with marketing people, or they've worked with project managers. As Innocent mentioned at the beginning, I'm also a producer. So I've worked on lots of projects that I'm the person trying to keep the project on time and make it happen. Because I've worked on so many projects over the years that I now know all the steps to keep a project moving and get that momentum going. So you might want to work with a producer who can just help guide you and keep things on time and make sure it happens. So cost in that. Once you've costed all those things in, again, imagining as if it was from your own credit card or your own pocket, then you've got a baseline. And that's the baseline that you can't go below. So whatever you fundraise for has to be more than that, because things can go awry, projects can move and shift, and you might need to get a bit more money than just the bare minimum. Unless, of course, you choose to part self-fund. Some artists might put some of their own savings in and then apply for the rest. And when you're applying to someone like the Arts Council or another funder, you can say that I'm also putting my own funds in this. And this also, they're quite pleased about, because it tells them that you're prepared to take on some of the risk. So you've got your baseline, add your contingency, allow for materials, and then lots of the application forms might have things like this, where they list the individual areas, and you then have to break down your project into things like artistic spending, making your work accessible, different categories, which can be a bit of, it can mess with your head a bit, it's a lot of work. Do it on a spreadsheet. Don't work it out when you're in the form. Do all of your work on a spreadsheet or on Word, whatever works for you. I prefer spreadsheets because actually you can have it adding it up as you go, so it helps you keep on track, and then copying and paste it into this. And then often they will ask you about matched funding. Now, one of the things about matched funding is it isn't about the money, which sounds, you know, of course it's about the money. But if they ask you to get a certain percentage of matched funding, 5%, 2%, whatever, it's not actually about the cash, it's about splitting the risk. So a separate funder, somebody else, cares about your project as well as this funder and will help you keep it on track, or you've got to report back to. So it's two people who are checking in with you to make sure you're doing what you said you were going to be doing, which is why they care about matched funding or partnership funding. So sometimes you might say, well, you know, maybe you can't find enough money, but other people might give you their time, or they might mentor you. And all of those things for the funder is about spreading the risk, because you've got other people, again, checking in with you, making sure that your project is achievable and deliverable. So that's why they really want that. So do think about if you can put some of your own money in, or if you can work with other people. And the next thing that's really important to do, and I do this alongside at the same time when I'm making the budget, because it's really easy when you're writing a budget to go, oh, I'm going to do all these things. You know, I'm going to do an exhibition, I'm going to do public engagement, I'm going to do all these talks and events. And very quickly you can overpromise and commit to way more than you have time, money, or capacity to do. So by using a spreadsheet, you can start to put in the different categories here. So the different categories of what you think are going to happen in the project. You know, write down the months, think about any deadlines or special events or key dates that are going to be in here. And you can start to break down everything that you need to achieve in the project period. I can't recommend doing this process enough. It's during this time that I start to go, oh goodness, I have overpromised. And that's my next point. Do not overpromise. Because, well, some funders are really aware of it. Some will really sniff out a project where you've promised you can do everything. And you sort of want to, because you're like, please give me some money. This is a great idea. I'll do everything. Promise you. You can end up promising more than is achievable and delivering none of it very well. They would rather have you doing handful of things really well than 20 things that you don't do very well, because it's just you're overstretched. So this is why the plan exists. This is that you plan it out, but you also prove to yourself and the funders that this is an achievable project, that you're not screwing yourself over trying to deliver it. So the last thing I want to really say is that delivering a project is hard work. And that's what I was saying about don't screw yourself over. I was having a bit of a laugh with Innocent last night when we chatted about this talk, that it's, you know, delivering a project is a lot of responsibility. You've got the funder then, you know, believing in you, and you've convinced them, you've got people on board, and then you know, you've got a responsibility to deliver, and it can be really lonely. You can set yourself in a position where you've promised to deliver lots of things on your own without any backup or support. So think about who you can work with. That's one of the things I've really learned over the years. I've done a lot of projects on my own, and I enjoy it most when I'm working with a team. We've just finished doing Format 21, which is an online festival, and that's one of the highlights of my career, was working really tightly with the Format team all together to make a brilliant project happen. And I think that's where I'm happiest. It's about being part of a busy team, making something brilliant happen. So you could do it on your own with, you know, possibly more money for you, but actually you could spread it out, support other people on their career, and share the journey, and, you know, take it a bit easier on yourself. Because sometimes no is the best gift, which sounds terrible, but I've had projects I've applied for and the funder said no, and I've said, oh, thank goodness for that, because I promised way too much that was not achievable, and actually I don't really want to do it anymore. So sometimes no is a win. And then if you do get the funding, or even if you don't, if you're applying again and trying to work out what you're doing, just look out for yourself. It's a difficult journey, but it's a really rewarding one. It can really help you shape the career you want, rather than just falling into competitions or, you know, curation programs. You can, from other organisations, you can just plot your own journey, which is what I've done in my career. I couldn't find anywhere to curate, so I made my own curation project in the streets of Derby. Lots of projects where I couldn't find a residency and applied for residencies and not got them, so I wrote my own, you know. But you don't have to do it all yourself. Be kind to yourself, work with other people. Things can go wrong, like global pandemics. And whether you get a yes or no, to learn from it and try to have fun. It's incredibly important to try to have fun. So I'm just wrapping up. That's pretty much the end of my talk. I wanted just to share with you a few places that you can look for funding. So in the UK, we have this Directory of Social Change, which is incredibly expensive to access, but various libraries in the country have grants for individuals, which is part of Directory of Social Change. So ask your local library. They may have subscriptions to funding directories that are way beyond your price range. I mean, to access this for a week is £100, which is just unaffordable. So yeah, check out your local library, see if they've got access. There's websites like Trans Artists who have lots of opportunities for international artists. The British Council, there is Funding for All, have got some projects. They've got a whole list of projects that fall into arts and culture. Only 3 of them, unfortunately, were for artists, but form a collective and then you can apply as an organisation. Triangle Network have got projects for international and African artists, and British Council as well, which have funded these talks. So have a look around, have a chat to people. And you never know, you might be working on your next funded project very shortly. I hope today's talk has been useful.
Thank you so much for that, Debbie. Very informative. Took a few notes myself for that. I think it's funny actually, because I use word count quite a lot when I'm doing applications, but it's just mainly to kind of keep in within the limitation within the numbers. But I've never actually used it for the word, like for the word mirroring. So that's definitely something that I'm going to have a look at and try out. With that, so thank you so much for that. A really informative session. And one of the things that I wanted to ask actually with regards to your, I suppose with regards to like artists starting off, because I suppose a lot of people say, you know, it's all about that first application, isn't it? Once you've done your first application, you know, you've kind of crossed that, you've overcome that barrier, and even better if it's a successful funding application. What would you advise for artists who are just starting out in terms of what the best type of funding or platform is to use? Maybe like for an artist who is starting off on a smaller project, trying to test something out, what would you recommend?
if you're starting out, the very first thing I try and do is read other people's funds. Lots of people, funding applications, lots of people are generous. I have sent so many of my successful applications to other people. And I've also spent part of my career working professionally as a fundraiser. So I worked as head of fundraising at a museum. And I discovered there that fundraisers share applications all the time, that I could phone another museum who'd had funding from somewhere that I wanted to go and say, can I have a copy of your successful application? They go, yeah, I'll just email you now. So you can learn from how other people write. And some funders, I think the Arts Council at the moment on their allow you to either download or apply to see a copy of it. So if someone's done a project that you think, actually, that's quite similar to where I want to go, you can request information to read the application. But when it comes to smaller bids, one of the ones I talked about at the beginning was I had £300 from a charity called the Ernest Bailey Trust. Now that's distinct to a 5-mile radius of where I live in Derbyshire. But there's lots of other little ones like that. If you speak to your local council, the access from that was my town council. What happens is quite fairly rich people might pass away and leave a trust for people in that locality. I also, when I was a student, applied to a trust fund that supported the Irish diaspora. So my parents are Irish, and it meant that as a child of an Irish citizen, I could apply to this fund, which gave me £1,000 towards my tuition fees. So there's lots of really small funds. Unfortunately, there's not a go-to place to discover all this. The thing I mentioned, like the Directory of Social Change, has quite a long record, but you've got to pay for access. So you need to find a library or someone will give you access. It depends on what you're wanting it for as well. You might look at other artists who are on a similar journey to you, but maybe you think their career's a bit further on. And then you can look at who's funded them. And they might have been supported, again, in small chunks of £300, £500, £1,000. You know, when I had the mirrors for one of my first exhibitions, that was £200 or £300 worth, but it was money that I didn't have, and I could not have done that project without it. So yeah, even the small little bits can really help. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, thanks for that, Debbie. Also, thanks for the session.
Oh, sorry, Edison. I think Nyanko, is it Nyancho?
Yancho. Yancho has a question. Okay, Yancho can go first, and I'll follow. Yancho.
Oh, you're muted, Nyancho.
Okay, she's muted. Yancho, okay, yeah, she's back. Okay, I'll just take my own question while she sorts out her, I think, a bit of a network. So my question is, so a lot of this very this the founding methods you touched on in this informative talk kind of focuses on what I might call traditional ways of funding arts projects, right? I mean, these are the tried and yes, trusted in a lot of way. Applying for grants, applying for funds, if there's public funding, trying to tap into it. I'm trying to, and I think the bit of a departure is also how to work in local businesses into it to get them to also support. And that's very refreshing to see that there's a possibility there. But I'm also looking at in the current age and time we are in, there are also a lot of conversations about new and demand also for new and radical ways of doing things or approaching things. And one of the many things I have had, conversations I've had with friends and colleagues is how tired they are with writing funding applications. It's going to be very tiring, especially when you consider that every application you are writing is a competition against a colleague, is a competition saying my work is more important at least at this time than this other person's. And this had led to a lot of look into how else can we fund arts projects, how else can artists fundraise, how else can art organizations fundraise. And I have there are two in particular I'm thinking of, and I don't know if you can shed light on this too. One is there is this talk about the crowdsourcing model on one hand, and there is also, I mean, there are three models I would like you to give a bit of an insight on. There is a crowdsourcing model on one hand, there is the artist and investment model on the second, and then thirdly, there is also, and this is mostly for cultural organizations, the model of social enterprises, right? Being able to being able to raise funds by running your cultural institution or social enterprise in order to raise more funding. And I'm curious, how do you think people can come? How sustainable and viable are these models? And how do you think people can, operate this model successfully?
So that was crowdsourcing, social enterprises and investment. I think that's right.
Yes.
So if I look at crowdsourcing first, I have done a crowdsourced funding, and also lots of artists are looking at Patreon, which is quite an interesting area. Now, for some people, it might look like it's an easier route than applying through funding, through writing your forms and getting your partners in and working out your budget and so forth. And I'd say a Kickstarter or something like a Patreon is incredibly beneficial if you are brilliant at social media, if you are good at creating a following, if you love being online and talking to your networks and getting people fired up, then that's really useful. I know lots of artists who are using Patreon to supplement their income. I don't know any artists who've now moved into Patreon being fully their income. And for those of you who don't know, Patreon, and there's some other platforms that are similar, allow you to have followers that pay to follow you, and then you put out content regularly. And that's the point. It's about regular content. So if you're regularly making content that you want to put online, a painter I know does painting classes for her Patreon groups. It doesn't have to be necessarily that you're a video maker or that media is your focus. You could just use it to record the work you do. But she has to make videos every single week. And then she has different tiers. So some Patreon followers might pay more to have a one-to-one with her. So it's a lot of work. She has to keep them involved, keep them excited and interested, and keep on with that. The next step from that is you might want to do something like Kickstarter. Again, there's multiple models like GoFundMe and so forth. And that's great if you're really well networked. The only way they're really successful is if you've got a lot of people and you're happy to keep emailing them and get them on board and get them to tell their friends and their friends. The very, very big successful Kickstarters are often when people want to buy a product. Well, it's hard to compete with those. But it's, for artists, lots of artists have done like things like books or crowdsourced an exhibition, and people have paid for print or to have their name up as part of the exhibition. And there's a model of tiers depending on how much money you want. But engaging your audience constantly is the only way they are successful. I had some training with Kickstarter HQ, and they showed some of their most successful projects. And the only way they say that they're successful is if you have a 30-day plan, because most Kickstarters run for 30 days, a 30-day plan of engagement constantly with your audience, sending out updates, talking to people, reconnecting, marketing. And by marketing, I mean showing it on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook feeds and things, And again, if you're really excited and switched on by social media, then definitely give it a go. It could well be a way of circumnavigating lots of opportunities that you think aren't available to you, and you can reshape funding your work as fits for you. Moving into the social engagement model. Now, I've spent quite a lot of my career working for galleries and museums who really tap into that. So did you say, sorry, social investment? Not social enterprise.
Social enterprise.
Social enterprise. So lots of galleries and museums deliver work that used to be delivered by local councils. So it might be like Quad, we've done workshops and wellbeing for carers, people who are looking after a loved one at home all the time and don't get time to maybe leave their home and have some wellbeing and support. So lots of these areas that a local council used to run have been pushed out a bit further to allow for other people. Galleries are one of them, other organisations, to step up and take up part in this. For example, at Quad, we run this group called Q Club, which supports parents with young people with autism by running workshops and classes. The parents have a bit of time out, the children can network and make friends and be supported and learn, and in a really safe environment. Now that's relatively easy for a gallery, museum or organisation to step into. It's more challenging for artists individually, but not necessarily if you're a collective. I do know some artist collectives who step into this and create programs that do work in this area and do very well. But it can take up all your time. Essentially, it's a job in itself. And you might find that although it's bringing you some funding in, it's taking you away from everything you wanted to do in your practice, unless that level of engagement is your practice, when that's fine. So there can be a downside with any funding direction, that it can take up more time than your practice you want it to. And then the last thing you mentioned about is these groups that invest in artists. And if that's for you, that's great, but it is about investment. So they expect you to become worth more. They expect your work to become worth more. And it's about not only convincing them that your work is worthwhile, that your work is valuable, that it will increase in value, and that your practice will. So you are creating a trajectory for your career. They want to see that you're hitting big exhibitions, that you're having lots of press about your work, that people are reviewing what you do, that you're getting in the right places, which is a challenging journey. And you might want to work with other people to support you on that, curators, producer, other people who already know those networks and can support you on that if you think that's for you. But it can also, this trajectory can be quite tight. So you're expected to be working in a certain progression in your career for them to keep investing in you. And it gives you some freedoms, but it takes some away as well. So all of those models can be ways to support your work, but also there can be ways that take away all your energy from your work, including fundraising. You might spend all your time fundraising, and that becomes a big part of your work.
Thanks so much for that. I just wanted to add as well that there's another crowdsourcing website platform that quite a few creators have started using called, I think it's called Coffee, but it's spelled like KO-FI. And what it is that, and I'll pop the link in the chat, but it's a website where people can donate the price of a coffee, of a bit of an expensive coffee, £3 in the UK, to fund a project, or to allow an artist to continue creating. And so you can choose as to how many coffees you buy. So for example, if you buy 3 coffees, that would be £9, and you can do it, I think you can do it periodically, or you can do it as and when you can. So that's another really good one that I've noticed that quite a few people have been using. And I think it's also that kind of thought, isn't it, that support only is, it's the cost of a coffee. And so it kind of puts it into context a bit. So I'll pop the link for that in the chat as well.
And I think you can add a coffee button to your website, but to be fair, you can also add a PayPal donation button. So it is the same concept. It's just, the content I'm making, my artistic journey, costs me time. And if you're enjoying it, I'd like you to put your hand in your pocket and support it, and actually the word donation, just having it on your website, is a really great reminder to people that they can support an artist, and they can support you at, like you said, like £3, or more, preferably. More would be nice. Which is also the great thing about some of these ones. There's a slider on them, so you can say to people, you can give more.
Yeah, no, they're really, really good. And I just wanted to, I think there's a question, let me just check before I start hugging all the questions. So there's a question from Nyancho. So their question is, can artists on the African continent access these funders, e.g. Arts Council England? And if they can, do the projects have to be executed in the UK, or are they only for UK-based artists?
So Arts Council England is for work either happening in England or artists based in England. So, for example, you could be included in a project that is showing in England, or maybe you're based in England, but it does have to happen that either it happens within England or it supports an artist from England. There's various caveats, and lots of galleries and museums are very experienced in applying to Arts Council England, so they might be able to give you advice as to how to navigate that if you were showing in England. I'm just going to share my screen again. Let me just go back to from the sharing button, because I shared a few funders on there. As the Arts Council England are for within England, which is also frustrating for artists in Scotland and Wales because they're excluded from that, but there are different funding bodies for them. So the art either has to happen in England or an artist from England. Heritage Fund isn't open to artists, it's open to organisations, but you can create a collective to apply. And again, that needs to happen in the UK. So these ones are UK. Now the Pollock Krasner Foundation are international. I'm not sure about Arkwright. I really struggled to find enough funders abroad, but I think partly because my search function is switched to UK searchers. So you might find that there's different, if you start searching, that you come up with some things in your own network. Trans artists are really worthwhile looking at. So that is like Trans International, where that term comes from. And they have information about worldwide artist residencies, and lots of those are funded. There is the British Council, who currently have a cultural open exchange open call. And I think this project, these talks have been funded through the British Council, haven't they? Also Triangle Network. Even in the UK, where we have public funding, it's not great. It's really hard to find enough funders, and it has got tighter. So I think there's becoming more and more opportunities to look at private sponsorship, particularly if there's key parts of your work that you want making. But like I mentioned earlier, have a look at if there's any trust funds local to where you live, because they won't be advertised on the internet. The only way is actually if you speak to like local government or local council, but someone might have passed away who's left a trust fund for people locally, like has happened in where I live. And there's lots of little ones all over the country. So yeah, you have to have a good search. But if you do, share it with other people. And if more and more people share any funding opportunities they find, you can build a better network to support each other.
Thank you very much for that, Debbie. Yeah, and just to piggyback off what you said about the British Council, I know they've got their the SSA Creative Economies project as well. So, and I know they're working with most African countries. Some of the projects are based in specific African countries, but I'm always seeing call outs as well. So it's definitely worth signing up to the British Council mailing list for their SSA project as well, because I know they are looking to doing a lot of work in kind of cultural exchanges as well between the UK and countries on the continent as well. There was a question that I had which I forgot, but it always comes back to me. But Innocent just popped his camera on, so I don't know if he's looking to asking a quick question.
Yeah, I actually just want to make a quick comment, more like it, with regards to Yanacho's question. Um, I mean, part of the drill's long-term plan is also being able to create databases of opportunities and of resources for African artists. And part of the databases will create in long term. Hopefully by not this year, to be honest, but by next year we should already have that up. Database of funding opportunities as they come along, because yes, it's true. Like there are like categories of there. A lot of funding opportunities available outside the continent that are mostly restricted to outside the continent, and there are those that are internationally accessible. But then I've also noticed that there are new funding opportunities really creeping up within the continent, like the ACF funding and like so. Yeah, I just thought I should put that small plug out there that in future would also be collecting this information for people who need it.
Yeah, it's really important to share whenever you come across funders. And one of the other things which I mentioned earlier is if you look at other artists maybe who are working in your region and see who's funded them. And if it's a public funder, you can go to that funder. And if it's a private sponsor, you know, talk to the artist, say, you know, are they a good sponsor? Can I approach them with my work? Would they be interested? And if you are approaching companies to sponsor you, you often get more support with equipment than money. So some, like a projection company, a gallery I worked for, in fact, I think Quad might have had it as well. We had an exhibition where a very famous projection company provided the projectors, because it was a big exhibition and they wanted to have their name there as part of that. So there wasn't any cash, but the projectors were worth a heck of a lot and would be really expensive to hire. So think about products they have that you might want to use. And when it comes to approaching companies for that sort of exchange, it's the marketing people you want to talk about, because the only benefit they get from it is by being in a public space going, we're supporting the arts, our big logo's here, you know, or maybe it's on the marketing of your exhibition. So talk to the marketing team. You can often try and find someone on LinkedIn and approach them there. You'll see the company and look at the marketing person. But approach them with a really clear idea, what your exhibition is about, sell it. Just as I was talking in the application writing, tell a story about what your project's going to be, why it's going to matter, who's going to come see it, how special it would be, and they have an opportunity to make it happen. And, you know, see if you can get them excited about the work you're doing.
Thanks, Debbie. And I've remembered what I was going to ask now. The tell a story thing was a prompt. So yeah, you spoke a lot about kind of telling a story and stuff. And I wanted to ask, actually, before I get into the question, have you, I imagine that you've been on a panel for like applications, and have you administered like grant applications? And
well, I have recently started working for one of the UK's public funders. I don't want to mention it because I'm not in their work time right now. But I am working for a funder as of recent. And I chose to do that because I was really excited to learn the other side of it. I wanted to be able to read people's applications and understand more about this. And I have been reading people's applications. And when a story comes in, I just stop and go, oh, I can see this happening. I can imagine it in my head. I can see these projects, and I get all excited about it. And it's like, yeah, that is totally telling me the story. And I'm buying into everything they've got to talk about and the journey. Think about things that you read. Think about whether it's in the newspaper or in a magazine, just something that captures you and makes you remember it, stays in your mind, because you want the person who's assessing it and reading it for it to stay in their head, them to go, oh, that was a really good one. I really like that. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's the best project, but it's that visual image, it's the story they've told, it makes sense as a project, the public engagement, the journey, the exhibition, or whatever you're making, all just comes together as a complete story. And you can get other people that aren't in this career to read it for you. When my son was younger, when he was like 14 or 15, he used to read my applications because he was brutal. He would read it and go, that makes no sense. I have no idea what that means. What does this word even do? But when I got it right, when I got a clear story, he was like, oh, I really get what you're trying to say there. Because if you have to explain it in words to someone, and I've had this experience with lots of artists who've said, can you read my bid? And then started talking to me. I've gone, no, stop talking. Because if you have to tell me it's not a successful bid, because you won't be in the room when they assess it, I need to read it without listening to you. And if I don't get it, then it needs reworking. You need to get to the point where you can read it and totally understand what they're trying to sell, what the story is.
And so thinking about those, like the amazing stories, like the storytelling, the things that capture you, like as a funder, I wanted to also ask you about, I mean, obviously I know you can't go into details, into specifics. Could you go through a few don'ts or a few things that may have like jeopardized an application, maybe something that someone put in, or they didn't put in an application, something that was just a complete no?
Often it's people trying to use words that aren't theirs, which is semi the opposite of what I said about mirroring people's language. So learn those. You know, some organizations might use the word participants, whereas some might use beneficiaries, or, you know, so mirror those words, but actually use your own language. It's absolutely fine to say, this is going to be an amazing project and this is why. You don't have to be really clinical and academic about it. And I find that some people try and force their writing style into this really academic, structured way, and it's not natural to how they talk and how they write. And it's really jarring because it doesn't read properly. You're trying to get, I'm not quite sure what they mean. And then the other thing is that people don't answer the questions. I supported an artist on writing an application recently, and they'd written a big application, and at no point had they answered a single question that had been asked. They told what they wanted to say, and they hadn't actually answered any of the question that the funder had asked. The funder had asked, how will your project reach people? And they hadn't even mentioned the how. They just talked about people. You know, we're going to work with people. It's going to be fun. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. Like, but how? They asked how, and you didn't at any point tell them how. So things like, I will highlight in the funder's question the keywords. I might put a how in yellow and then go back through and go, have I actually answered that? Because it's really easy to get into what you wanted to say without really answering what you've been asked. And then the other thing is bullet points are your friends, because some of these character counts, whether it's for a commission or a funder, can be brutal. They're really tight. So you can say this project will achieve the following, and then just do a long list of all the things you're going to do, and then how you will do those things. Yeah, so don't put too much. Try and keep it concise. Try and really be clear. And I'm now waffling to prove the opposite of what I'm trying to say.
And thank you, Debbie. And my final question would be about, so I know you spoke about you spoke about budgeting, you know, when doing your application. And I remember you mentioned something about don't ask for less than what you need. It's always important. But just thinking about asking for more than what you need.
Oh,
I know
totally.
It's something that's quite common now, having contingencies and stuff like that within applications. I know some people say it should be 10%, it should be 15%, it should be this or that. What would your advice be in terms of like how much over your initial budget you should factor into the application, if that makes sense?
It is a sliding scale, but it depends on how long your project is going on for. The longer the project runs, the more chance it has to go off, you know, on a different direction, because things happen, like global pandemics. People have had to change exhibitions to online. You know, something could happen and change. What happens if you've hired someone to do marketing for your project and they suddenly can't do it anymore partway in, and you've got to recruit another person and spend all the money getting somebody else trained up and on speed? So you do definitely need a contingency. And the longer the project goes on, the more likely you are to tap into that. Also, the more elements in your project, the more things you have going on, the more chance you have things to go wrong. 5 to 10% is a good baseline. But if you think your project has a lot of risk in it, like lots of things that are happening, lots of things can go wrong, lots of people involved where it could go off in one direction, then maybe go higher on that. If you've got a good reason, because often when you're writing about the finance, you have to tell us a reason why you've put that choice in. So you can say that we've realised that we've got some risks here, here and here, so we've put in some contingency if anything happens in these. And yes, when you said go over, the baseline is not how much you need to apply for. It is what you can't apply for less than. But definitely add in, because you've got your time. It'd be nice to actually pay yourself, because this is your job as an artist. And if you don't pay yourself, then you have to get a job to exist, which means all that time and energy that would have gone into your project is going into your day-to-day job. So you do need to make sure that you've really got time to spend on it. So the baseline is the bottom, and then you want to come in with your time and things that can go wrong and opportunities, and add a bit. You know, if you think an exhibition is going to cost you £1,000, maybe put in £1,500, because actually there'll be some things you haven't thought about yet. It always costs more. I know Peter's here from Quad, and he'll tell you that every exhibition always costs more than we imagine.
That's very true. But also we can bring it in budget too, and that's even better.
Yes. Occasionally it hits budget, and then we're really pleased about that. We've got any more questions?
Any more? I'll have a look on YouTube. We don't have a question but we have some feedback. Awesome session. That's from Faber. So just giving her feedback on the session on YouTube.
Thank you.
But I think from my end, that's all the questions. Innocent, did you have any questions? Did anyone here on Zoom have any questions for Debbie before we wrap up?
No, I think that's my new concerns these days about the new ways money might be coming into the arts, or money can come into the arts, especially the social enterprise model. And I wanted to add also that the social enterprise model also, while it it's from what you said, sounds like it might be a bit of a difficult um, hassle, maybe a bit of a hassle and a bit of a difficult also for the artists, but for people building collectives and cultural organizations, it might actually be a way to ensure that there is like a bit of a steady flow of money to at least run your marketing and pay yourselves while you're doing what you're doing. And that's just all I have to add. Thank you so much, Debbie.
You're welcome. And you're exactly right. It is a great model. Some small galleries, like that started from artist collectives, it allows them to have an audience who come in and use their spaces and see the exhibitions. And it applies employment for artists. Lots of galleries and museums who have this model will employ artists to deliver it. So yeah, it's really beneficial.
Thank you so much. And so if there aren't any more questions, I think that brings us to the end, not just of this session, but of this series, the Art Times Money series of the drill. I'm going to have to try and find something else to do on a Tuesday afternoon now. But it's been amazing. It's been an amazing series. Thank you so much, Innocent, for coming up with the concept, for bringing people in and allowing us to have these conversations as well, conversations about things that artists not necessarily don't care about, but sometimes we just don't know where to start. I think, you know, let's face it, I think something that Chinasa said in last week's, or addressed in last week's session, was that, you know, artists, we just want to go out there and create, make our work, show it, but sometimes we don't know all of the things that we have to do in the background to protect our work, to make sure that, you know, we have the finances and the, you know, and the means to do things, and, you know, protecting ourselves really as artists. And also, I know we've had conversations about this whole thing, a myth about the starving artist and whatnot. And so it's been a really, really fruitful series in terms of the conversations that we've had. And I hope that all that have attended at least one session in this series has benefited from it. You've learned from it as well. I know that I've been taking notes throughout the sessions myself as well. So thank you so much to all of our speakers from the series. Thank you so much, Debbie, for sharing your wisdom as well. And thank you to all of the people that have attended these sessions and engaged with us as well. We really appreciate it as well. And yeah, so that's pretty much it for Art Times Money. I think Innocent just wants to say a few words before we wrap up as well.
Yeah, so I'm not going to repeat the thanks because Saizo has done that. Thank you, Saizo, for thanking everyone. So I just wanted to give a bit of a heads up that it's been really challenging, interesting, and fun organizing these sessions right from the gathering in 2020 up to this moment. And hopefully in future, we're going to do more of this, more physical and virtual sessions. But before that, we are also going to take some of the advice that have been shared on this programs, and take a bit of a time of step back and work on the organizational structure of the drill. So hopefully, in the next in some months, we will be announcing more of our plans. But for now, you most likely won't hear of anything new coming from us until much later. But just so you know, the drill is still committed to ensuring that art practitioners in Nigeria and African diaspora as a whole are taken care of in a sense, and are able to build their careers and their practices in a very viable and sustainable way. That has been the goal from day one. That will continue to be the goal. So even when we're not in front, in the front of the lights doing work, we are going to be backstage doing some work. So please, the videos from these sessions are going to be available. The live stream videos are still available on YouTube, but we're going to take the videos, the recorded videos, and edit them to be precise, and publish them. So feel free to share with your friends. Feel free to share with your colleagues. Feel free to come back and look through any of this if you need any pointers. And if you need to reach any of the facilitators, it's fine. Just send us an email. I'm always happy to link people up. Just send an email and would see to the meeting and see to the link up happening. So thank you everyone that attended. Thank you. We can't say enough. Thank you to Quad. There's an interesting story of how this partnership happened from our last events. How we almost didn't get the funding for the last event, and how that's rolled over to having funding for two events. So thank you so much to Quad, the Formats Festival, Peter, Louise, and Neve. You guys have been amazing, and I mean, it's this is what we part of what we said in the drill too about creative collaborations. It's through this networking and through these collaborations that we're able to bring things like this to light. And so thank you, and please, I'm not going to cash this enough. Please share these videos because the resource material over these last 5 weeks have been incredible. Like I intend to study them, and hopefully in future we're also going to transcribe some of these things and release papers based on these topics for anyone who wants to do more research into the relationship between art and money, especially in the African context. So thank you, and that's all for me.
Thank you so much, everyone. Yeah, just to echo what Innocent said, please watch the videos. We're taking a bit of a break to work behind the scenes for the next few months to work on the organizational structure of the drill. But during this time, there'll be plenty of content for you to consume online as well. So please do feel free to watch all the sessions back, not just from this series, but from the other two series that we did as well. But for now, thank you so much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon or morning or evening, wherever you are in the world. And we look forward to seeing you soon. Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.